Hey, what's going on? This is Jake. We are in a Bass Pro Shops parking lot right now. If you've been watching this channel, you've seen some of our hunter profile videos with like Mark Kenyon, Hannah Barron, and this one is about a whitetail and a very special one nonetheless. It's the #1 all-time archery typical buck, and there is an exact replica in there. We're gonna go take a look at it. And the reason we're doing this too is this buck has gotten a lot of attention and kind of has been revitalized here within the last week or two, as Don Higgin has killed the #2, the second to this one in the state of Illinois. So we're gonna go take a look at it, and then we're gonna learn all about the history of this buck, so let's go. All right, here it is, the Mel Johnson buck. You're gonna be learning all about the history of this deer and how much Mel Johnson made from shooting one of the most recognizable deer of all time and one of the longest standing records. You're probably gonna be surprised. Now let's go. Hunters have bagged millions of white-tailed deer in North America since the 1960s. Bow hunting techniques have evolved, new products have emerged, and equipment has improved in the past 42 years. Yet, this Illinois buck, Mel Johnson shot in 1965, still ranks as one of the most impressive whitetails ever killed with a bow and arrow. In fact, after 55 years of hunting seasons, it still stands tall as the largest typical whitetail to be taken with a bow and arrow.
October the 29th, 1965 in Peoria County, Illinois. I had been hunting whitetails there since the season opened October 1st, and I had seen this buck prior.
Now what's interesting with Johnson's buck is that it's not perfectly symmetrical. It is, however, massive. 3 tines are longer than 12 inches. The inside spread measures 23 5/8 inches, and the right main beam is 27 5/8 inches. No wonder Johnson earned the Boone and Crockett Club's Sagamore Hill Award in 1965, which is a medallion bestowed by judges for trophies of great distinction. Back then, Johnson worked full-time at Caterpillar Incorporated and hunted each night after work. Most fall weekends he left for work on Friday and drove to Wisconsin with friends, often returning just in time to work Monday morning. Johnson said, "We'd hunt all week in Illinois and maybe see a few deer, maybe not, and then go up to Wisconsin just to see deer." Seeing whitetails recharged his hunting batteries, though that wasn't really necessary in the year 1965. That fall, Johnson spotted a huge buck 3 times without getting close enough to shoot. Then came October 29th. That evening after work, Johnson set up in the brush along a picked bean field.
So I went down the field a wee bit and made myself a blind on the edge of the field in the grass, and got down on my knees and propped my bow up with a fork stick and proceeded to wait the evening out.
Johnson said, "We didn't have that many tree stands around then, and we were just starting to dabble with them and build with them." From his vantage point, Johnson saw the buck again. This time the deer emerged from the timber 300 yards away. From there, Johnson said, the buck walked smack dab in front of me, probably 3 or 4 rows of beans away.
He took a few steps and got just about across from me, and he sort of hesitated, and he turned and he looked at me, and then he just turned his head back and took about 2 or 3 more steps. At that time I raised and shot him through the chest cavity or the lungs.
From there, the buck ran into the field and disappeared over a rise. Johnson gave a chase and found his arrow, which had passed through the buck.
So then I stood up and I walked out and I looked, and I could see him out in the field still kicking a little bit, and walked towards him, picked my arrow up off the ground, which had passed through him, and walked out to him. And he was a rather large animal. He dressed 270 pounds, would put him about 340 on the hoof.
Over time, Johnson has become somewhat of an archery icon and has befriended or hunted with the industry's most famed figures, but he never got rich off his Beanfield buck. In fact, Johnson does not have the actual mount, which belongs to Bass Pro Shops. Overlooking the recliner in the basement is a replica mounted alongside a few plaques. Nearby is a photo album that includes a score sheet measuring Johnson's buck at 194 4/8 inches. That was filled out by the lone Boone and Crockett scorer in Illinois at the time, who was a Chicago resident whose tally left Johnson deflated.
I had studied the measuring system quite a bit. I knew pretty much what I had, and a fellow was measuring him, and he said, well, this is not really what we're looking for. He says he's not symmetrical enough and this and that. And he come up with a score about 9 or 10 inches less than I did, and I was completely deflated. And I thought, oh my land, what's going on? I couldn't have made that big a mistake, you know. So I took my deer and I went home, Put him up on the table and started measuring the entire thing all over again, and I got down to the last measurements, which this fellow had forgotten to take. So then I got the number of the Boone and Crockett Club. Well, they come up with a score of 204 4/8.
There have been so many stories written about this buck, and here we are recapping it again today. Although Johnson has since passed, his record still remains strong, and his place in the whitetail history books will be forever.